What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, August 3rd, 2016, the middle of the week, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Powwow on a Friday, and another crazy weekend here. We've got huge amounts of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the calls when you start calling on him with your comments here. Now, a couple of breaking scandals here. You could be forgiven for thinking the whole world is starting to come apart. Apparently, it has come on out that the U.S. government has been transferring vast sums of money to Iran to facilitate, in one case, the release of those 4 captured Americans, and in the other, to sort of grease the skids for the Iran deal. And, of course, the U.S. government is saying, well, it's really only a coincidence. This was money related to another issue from way back when, and, you know, there's no reason to think it's any kind of a bribe or a ransom or anything like that. And it's another example here that no matter what goes wrong, Iran, Iraq, the banks, when the government messes up, they're going to make you pay for it. Now, it's time to really start turning away from the corporate media and anybody in the government who's flapping their gums and look at the real world around you. Right now, at this moment, 3 of the 4 New York Times bestsellers are all books about Hillary Clinton, and none of them are flattering. Hillary Clinton's support has dropped 16% among young voters over the last year. Millennials are more favorable to the GOP. A lot of people want Hillary Clinton in prison, and yet, according to the corporate media, she's leading in most of the polls. Of course, we already found out, following the Democratic convention, the corporate media changed the methodology of their polls. In other words, they're rigging them. And this is a full court press. They do not want Donald Trump, and the tricks are getting dirtier and dirtier. We're going to be getting into some of these. But it is amazing. The entire establishment is just shivering in their boots over this populist backlash against business as usual. Now, as you know, one of the data dumps by WikiLeaks consists of emails that confirm what we already knew from some declassified U.S. government documents. Hillary Clinton was sending weapons to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria at the same time they were telling you ISIS and Al-Qaeda were our terrible enemies. Corporate media will not touch this story. They're still out there trying to say that Donald Trump is Putin's stooge and he's going to destroy the country. I mean, somebody wrote me an article, or somebody wrote me an email sending me an article saying, is this a hit piece on Trump? And I wrote back, is there anything coming out of the corporate media or political parties that isn't a hit piece on Trump? I mean, it's just full bore, loaded for bear. They are out to get him any way they can. And part of it is, of course, they're opposed to Donald Trump. He's not going to go along with their plans for a new world war and the new world order. And from the corporate media's point of view, they understand this could be the final battle for the minds of America. And if they lose this one, those $1 million salaries for all those talking heads are going to go away, because they're not paid that huge amount of money to tell you the truth. They're paid that huge amount of money to fill your head full of nonsense. All right, let's pick up the phone call. Paul in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mikey.
Yes.
How you been doing, brother?
Well, I'm doing as well as can be expected. What's on your mind today?
Well, you know, I've been looking at Hillary and I've been looking at Trump, and I've been doing the math in my head, you know. Probably Trump probably cares more.
Well, the thing we need to keep everybody's mind on is the fact that Donald Trump does not have this long history of crime and corruption and dead bodies following him. That's what we need to keep in mind. And in an honest election, he would win by a landslide.
Yeah, like no body bags.
Okay?
Yeah, like no body bags.
All right, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And sorry to be brief, but we do have a lot to cover. Now then, not too long ago, of course, we went through this whole fact-check situation where Hillary Clinton had made all these claims about her email server to the American people and to Congress, and James Comey came on out, both in his statement refusing to press charges and in his testimony before the Congress, refuting Hillary's claims. She lied, she lied, she lied, she lied, she lied. Well, Hillary Clinton is hoping that you are not paying attention to things like the director of the FBI. And she certainly hopes that you are not reading or listening to the independent media, because she actually went out this last weekend and said she had been perfectly honest with Congress and the people about the email server, and the FBI had backed her up on it. And, of course, even the corporate media had to say, no, wait, that's not what's going on. This is another lie. And then Hillary tried to backtrack by saying, well, it was her recollection that FBI Director James Comey had agreed with her. So she's literally out there campaigning for president, and at the same time she's saying she's got a faulty memory, which I don't think is quality that we should have in the Oval Office, along with Comey's excuse that she's reckless and careless and negligent. They're painting Hillary Clinton as a person who is not mentally equipped to be the president. Then the Hillary campaign backtracked one more time, saying that Hillary didn't really lie, it's just her honest opinion that FBI Director Comey supported her in her claim that she never lied to Congress and the American people. She is shameless, and they're trying to recover from that. They're trying to change the story, and one of the ways that they're trying to do that, we're going to talk about in a little bit. Meanwhile, I want to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining us. We're talking about, obviously, the current political campaign. Now, we've had a bunch of top DNC officials resign due to the WikiLeaks email scandal. They're basically validating everything that was in those released emails was absolutely factually true. They cannot refute any of them. The DNC was working for Hillary Clinton and against Bernie Sanders. And there's more to come. Even the CEO of the entire Democratic National Committee has been forced to resign. And they're getting really desperate out there. They're getting really desperate out there. They're recycling the vagina vote. And I'm not kidding you about this. Over at National Post, Jen Garson came out with an article saying, even if you don't like Hillary Clinton, you should vote for her anyway because it's important to have a woman president. That's literally what she said. Even if you don't like Hillary, even if you love Trump, you should vote for Hillary. It's important we have a woman in the White House. Never mind the trail of dead bodies and endless crimes and corruption, possible espionage. Never mind that the FBI says she's reckless and careless and negligent. Never mind that right now she's claiming she's got a faulty memory to get off of that lie about how the FBI supported her. Never mind the numerous felony-level Title 18 violations. It's important that Hillary be president because she's got a vagina. That's it. They're back to playing that one. We need a woman president. Now, what's really scary about this article is that Jen has confirmed to us one more time the cult-like following that is supporting Hillary Clinton. They're so wrapped up in that idea of a woman president, they simply do not care about Hillary's crimes, or that she will in all probability continue to behave the same way were she to become president. Now, remember back in 2008 when we were all encouraged to elect a black man as president simply because he was a black man? And look what we got. Obamacare, more wars, a ruined economy, more NSA spying. And now those same people who are out there saying, vote for Obama because we need a black president. Now they're out there saying, vote for Hillary because we need a woman president. I think it's time for the American voters to raise their standards and start electing candidates without regard to their color or gender. but with an eye to not electing somebody with a 20-year history of criminality and a demonstrated capacity for lies to the highest office of the land. And contrary to the screeching emails that I'm getting on a regular basis, I don't have a problem with a woman as president. I have a problem with this particular individual as president. And this idea of selling us candidates on the basis of gender, color, orientation, basically is a flashing neon sign. They know she cannot run on her actual historical background. Now, there's an interesting article out here from PatriotRising.com about how the anti-Hillary economy is booming in terms of merchandise. I got some of it here, my horny Hillary, the nutcracker, the toilet paper, all the rest of that stuff people are sending me. Right now, Hillary's America is the top grossing documentary in theaters. As I mentioned before, 3 out of the 4 top New York Times bestsellers are anti-Hillary Clinton books, plus T-shirts, buttons. It's the lying Hillary doll. There's just an absolute fury of commercial activity going on. So I guess we could believe Hillary Clinton when she says she's creating jobs. And it gets even more interesting than that. Up in Iowa, in the city of Arcadia, their fire department had a parade to celebrate their 100th anniversary. And apparently the star attraction of the parade was a guy dressed in an orange prison suit wearing a Hillary mask inside a bar and barbed wire cage festooned with Hillary for prison signs. And people were encouraged to target the Hillary clone with water balloons, and apparently it was a huge, huge hit. Even the police thought it was great. There was like maybe 1% in the crowd out there saying, "You shouldn't be doing that to Hillary." So as I mentioned before, we're seeing this full court press. Everything coming out of the media, everything coming out of the political establishment, they are just absolutely dreading Donald Trump. He represents a backlash by the people against the entrenched oligarchs who have ruined this nation. And there's an article out here from PatriotRising.com, why the D.C. Wall Street axis hates Trump. Because he's really going to change things. Every politician campaigning is out, I will bring change, and they never do. Obama campaigned on that in 2008, hope and change, and we hoped and we got no change. Hillary Clinton will preserve the status quo, the war party, the bailouts for the banks, the deregulation of Wall Street. That's why they want her. And as I said, right now the corporate media is taking anything Donald Trump does and turning it into an attack. They're making a big deal of the fact that Donald Trump is refusing to support Paul Ryan for his re-election campaign. And apparently John McCain is out there threatening a civil war in the Republican Party if we do not get rid of Donald Trump. You remember John McCain, the guy we got pictures of with the heads of ISIS and everything? That guy. And he's facing a stiff uphill fight because there's a major anti-incumbency fever sweeping the electorate. Now, anybody who's out there saying Donald Trump should be backing all of the GOP candidates needs to go back and remember how the GOP was not backing Donald Trump until the Republican voters forced them to deal with the voters, which is what this is really all about. But no matter what Donald Trump does, they're going to turn it into a negative because they are just scared. Now, I want to talk about a story. This blossomed all over the corporate media just this morning. How the Republican National Committee is considering options if Donald Trump drops out. And they're talking about how they're going to have to form this committee of 168 members of the RNC through this complicated process to pick a new candidate, and it would have to happen by early September. Now, according to Trump's campaign, this is nonsense. And I was watching Donald Trump at one of his little rallies earlier today. He doesn't look like a guy who's ready to drop out. So why are they putting this out there? Well, there are two possibilities. One is it's just another classic dirty trick to undermine Trump's support by suggesting he might drop out. And by the way, the same time this was hitting the corporate media, I must have received 25 emails from total strangers saying, you know, Donald Trump is going to drop out and hand it to Hillary. You just know he's going to drop out. They're pushing this agenda. Worst case, the Republican National Committee is preparing for Trump to be assassinated. And to put forward a candidate Hillary Clinton can roll right over. We're going to take a phone call. Alex in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Alex, are you there?
Yes. Do you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Hello. Okay. I just wanted to start this conversation out to let you know that the rigged election has already begun. If we don't realize that, even with, we need to understand that Hillary is the press. She owns the press. So they can say she's 50 points ahead right now, and that's their way of rigging the election to begin with, just to let you know that. That's what they did with Bernie Sanders. But I also wanted to say that I thought it was so nasty the way Hillary Clinton was talking about keeping us safe on her acceptance speech to Democratic as the Democratic candidate. It was just, I couldn't stand it. The status quo is so in charge. We need to exit the system.
Well, that's what everybody's doing, and that's why they're afraid of Donald Trump. This election is not about Republican versus Democrat, liberal versus conservative. This is the American people trying to oust this entrenched, corrupted elite. This is a populist backlash against the last 5 presidential administrations. And people are very, very angry about what's been going on. And the elites don't want to let go. They've become billionaires, looting the American people, plundering the American people, sending our kids off to loot and plunder other countries. They think the system works just swell for them. And they don't want to let go. Not for a little thing like the will of the people in democracy.
I know. And what is so sad, and I can't believe we're here, is the fact that we went to war with Iraq after 9/11, and we're continuing that war. That's a continuation of that war that was a bogus war. The war
so was
on
Afghanistan.
Bogus.
So was Afghanistan. All these wars were bogus.
It's all the same war. And I don't understand why people don't understand that.
Well, I can't
understand why the Democrats don't understand that is a bogus war.
Well, it is a bogus war. They're all bogus. And General Wesley Clark blew the whistle on this all the way back, I think, in 2003, where he came on out and said there was a policy by the U.S. government to conquer or regime change all the oil-rich nations of the Middle East to make sure they continued to sell their oil only for the U.S. dollar. And it was this huge program of all these countries ending with Iran in 2008. Obviously, they're off the timeline on this. But that's what these wars are all about. It's all about money and oil, the petrodollar, Bretton Woods, and all of those American kids who've been killed and crippled were sacrificed to make the bankers richer than they already are. And then abandoned by the Veterans Administration that couldn't be bothered taking care of them, while it spent $20 million on artwork for their lobbies and $100 million on conventions for their executives.
That's right. And let's keep in mind, it's the same war. There's one war. It might be in many different countries over there, but it is the same bankers' war, like you say. It is.
It absolutely is.
We need to recognize that, and it's a big scam. And this is for all the middle-aged people that are that make up this country. We can't afford to hand this status quo over to our kids to take care of.
No, unfortunately, if we don't... Already. Okay, we're coming up on a commercial break here. If we don't change the status quo, we condemn the next generation to be killed and crippled in more wars of conquest. And that is the hard reality. Okay? All right, Alex,
more than the next
we're at a commercial break, Alex. Alex, thank you very much for the phone call. Got to let you go. Got to take a commercial break. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, we ran a poll on our website today. If the election were held today, who would you vote for? Hillary Clinton got 2%. Donald Trump got 98%. Now, over in Israel, as much as they are opposed to Donald Trump, they're starting to look at the possibility he could actually win in November. He could win by such a large margin the vote riggers can't take it away from him. And apparently, there's an Israeli company that already wants the contract to build Donald Trump's wall across the Mexican border. So there's a little sort of left-handed positive endorsement, if you will. Now let's get back to, I think it's pronounced Kaiser Khan. And apparently it gets worse and worse and worse. Because remember we were talking about how he had this website for a law firm where he made money getting visas for Muslim immigrants. That's why he's opposed to Donald Trump's closing the borders. It would hit him in the wallet. And this law firm, Hogan Lovells, that he worked for at one point, is involved in the Clintons themselves, Saudi Arabia, and even more interesting, helped acquire the patents for part of the technology she used in crafting her illicit homebrew email server. And in yet another embarrassment, Khan believes the Constitution should be subordinate to the Sharia. Apparently back in 1983, Khan wrote a glowing review of a book compiled from a seminar held in Kuwait about human rights. And is this the best that they could come up with to go after Donald Trump? I mean, it's just falling apart. They are desperate. They're grasping at straws, and they're only making themselves look worse. Let's grab a couple of quick phone calls. Mike in South Carolina, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, what's on my mind is about an hour ago, David White over at AJ's Slot Trough announced that Trump's Vice President, Mike Pence, is going to back Wisconsin's, not Wisconsin, but Paul Ryan for re-election. What do you know about that?
Well, I guess Pence is allowed to do that, but he's already showing that he's straining at Donald Trump's leash. And again, it does seem like the entire system is just trying to find some way to undermine Donald Trump and get him out of there. They're scared of him. They are absolutely scared of him.
If Paul Ryan, somebody needs to be gotten out of there. And was it Nealon?
Yeah.
Was running against Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan's just trying to ignore him, not to let people know that he has somebody running against him. But I think Nealon is the one running against him, and he's supposed to be very, very strong in all areas. So people need to start thinking about Nealon and get rid of Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan's a rhino, he's a backstabber. He's just another one of the globalists who needs to hit the road. I agree. If we're going to get Donald Trump into the White House in November, we need to give him a political structure, a Congress that will work with him and not block his every single move. And again, the opposition Paul Ryan is facing, the opposition that John McCain is facing, there is a serious anti-incumbency fever sweeping this nation. And we could see the vast majority... What we need to also do, Mike, is we also need to also point this out, and that people are fed up with Jewish control. All right.
Thank you very much. We're going to let you go with that. We don't need to spin it off into some place where they can scream, "Oh, they're being anti-Semites again." Let's just stop with the fact that they're corrupt, and in many cases incompetent, and leave it at that, and get their pink slips ready. And yes, I'm concerned about the Israel firsters, but let's call them Israel firsters, and not walk into the ADL's propaganda sphere of influence. People need to be careful about that stuff. Real quick, Steve in California, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, you put that really well, Israel firsters. I like that idea of saying that better.
Yes.
That way nobody can point the finger at you.
Yeah.
No, I wanted to talk to you about the election fraud possibility and likelihood it would probably happen. I just got off the phone talking to Steve Stars, who had a show on RBN, and it was called Lightspeed. And he had a great idea about what Trump should do, a couple of different things. And one of them was to validate the votes, because we know they're going to screw around with the votes, but actually have people that were saying, I'm a follower and I'm going to vote for Trump, give them kind of a PIN number and a call-in to verify the day they vote, that their vote
Okay, Steve.
was placed in a PIN number to verify that.
Steve, we've got to take a break for commercials. Do not go away. I want to come back to you and this topic after these few words. And hello, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking with Steve here. And let's keep things simple, because what you're describing about tracking and PIN, that's a lot of infrastructure to develop, would have to work within the existing election system, and nobody's going to allow that to happen. I have a much simpler way to go, and we have got 2 months to get this to go viral. And that is, everybody who votes for Donald Trump simply writes a little note, "I voted for Trump," and they stick it on the front of their shirt or jacket. Even just a letter T made out of tape, so that when they're out there in public, the true scale of Trump's support is visible to everybody. I think that would be a better idea than trying to come up with some kind of a complex computerized system, which of course is going to be, rigged and attacked. I mean, Hillary Clinton's campaign is admitting, they're paying these online trolls to do stuff.
He also mentioned something else about taking the first step and calling your voting district there and clarifying that you were in the system and your full name and everything else. It's all authentic and everything is on the up and up. And let them know right off the bat, we will be watching this very, very closely. And if we see discrepancies, who do we talk to and who do we file the paperwork with? And so let them know you're going to be watching this really close.
That's a very excellent idea. Everybody, especially after what happened in California, you need to verify you are still registered to vote in November, because they're going to be playing with those registrations. Okay? That's an excellent idea.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks. And I think our next caller is Anthony in California. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Anthony, are you there?
Hello?
Hello,
Michael?
yes.
Hello, Michael, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. I just wanted to ask you, do you think Pence was a good choice for Trump?
No, actually, I disagreed with that. I think Trump would have done better to go with somebody who's more in line with his policies, who's certainly going to be standing with him, which Pence just demonstrated he isn't. I think Trump would have done very well to have gone with a female vice president to yank that vagina vote out from underneath Hillary's campaign, because they've gone back to it. That article that we were talking about earlier in the show, where they're out there saying, even if you hate Hillary Clinton, you must vote for her because we need to have a woman as president.
One other thing, Mike, I wanted to ask you, can you give me your email address? I'd like to email you. I tried to go to your website to see if I can email you, and it won't give me your email address.
It's right up there in the top bar. It says email what really happened. And the email address is WRH at...
Just a minute. Just W... Yes, WRH...
at WhatReallyHappened.com.
Okay. I got you, Mike. Thank you so much, Mike. I really... thank you so much, all right?
All right. Thank you very much here. And we're going to switch over to Al in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I hope you're doing well.
Well, we're doing okay. Got some tech issues we're trying to get past.
Your suggestion about wearing that tee, or, an H for that matter, is a great idea. But, you just have to look at the crowds that these people are drawing. Obviously, Trump is not, rigging his seating like Hillary is. It's all out there for people to see it.
You're
Hillary's
right.
Paid online shills can't cover this stuff up.
No, they can't. Donald Trump is selling out sports arenas, and Hillary's getting maybe 100, 200 people to show up at her events, and we don't know how many of them are members of the local Democratic Party that are trying to pad the crowds. It is very obvious that the reality is Hillary does not have the popular support. They're trying to craft an illusion that America loves Hillary Clinton despite all the dead bodies and corruption and crime, and that everybody hates Donald Trump because he just won't go along with the New World Order.
Yeah, I'm really hoping he wins in your country. He's not going to be very good for Canada. Already as we speak, Unilever, Canada-wide, all of the Unilevers are pulling out. I'm dismantling a few of them up here in Toronto. And just recently, I was up in Barrie. Nestle, they make this coffee that's just crummy. But anyways, they're moving back down to the States. So I mean, it's already starting. And of course, you know, Donald Trump, if he rips up that NAFTA, which is a good idea, it's going to accelerate.
Yeah, well, I'm all in favor of bringing the work back to the American people. This country belongs to we, the American people. It doesn't belong to Wall Street. It doesn't belong to the Israel Firsters. It doesn't belong to Israel. It's our country. We built it generation after generation after generation. And we have every right to want the best for our nation and our people. And everybody else on the planet is going to have to take care of themselves. Now, I don't agree with everything that Donald Trump says, but I agree with much of it. I still think he's dangerously naive. That's why he keeps walking into these traps they're setting for him in the media. But the prime reason I'm supporting Donald Trump is he is from outside. He is the face of a populist backlash against entrenched corruption. And I would love to see him in the White House. He's got an uphill battle between the corporate media, election fraud, possible assassination attempts. But we're just going to have to work as hard as we can to give him a rig-proof majority.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Another thing, I mean, it would be great if this were to all come about without the use of the Second Amendment, which obviously, you know, Clinton thinks that should be regulated. I mean, all rights, she believes, should be regulated. Where did these people come up with this stuff? I mean, how can anybody even believe in such nonsense such as that?
Well, that's part of the salesmanship, and that's really what politicians are. They're highly paid salesmen to sell you the corporate agenda. And right now, the elitists are terrified. They're seeing the beginnings of a populist backlash against their policies. And they don't want to give up all those billions of dollars pouring out of your pockets into their pockets. And so they'd like to disarm America. And I'll guarantee you this, if Hillary Clinton steals the White House, she is going to come down hard on the independent media. She's going to throw out that First Amendment and say, look, you know, only government-approved outlets can use the Internet for information distribution, because she's going to be afraid if she steals that White House, it's going to be a firestorm of everybody reminding America about all the corruption of the last 22 years and picking everything she does apart, just dissecting it in full view of America when she's in office. And so it's a guarantee. She's going to throw that Bill of Rights right out the window, because to not do so is to risk impeachment.
Well, it would be in full view of the world too, Mike. You know, and at that point, the Second Amendment's there for these people.
You know, let me finish something here. Again, I would like to see this present situation resolved without bloodshed. The way the former Soviet Union collapsed, there are so many parallels between what's going on in America today and in the months leading up to the collapse of the Politburo. And I'd like to see that as the final outcome. However, I understand, because I'm hearing it from a lot of people, where they're talking about it may go to violence. Because as John F. Kennedy used to say, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And for all the gun grabbing and regulation and so forth, the reality is Americans are buying guns in record numbers. It's the one part of our economy that's doing really, really well. Every time the gun grabbers come on out and talk about control, sales go through the roof. They set another record last month, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, the people of the United States, they're not silly when it comes to that sort of thing. They can see the writing on the wall with the Democrats.
They can. If Trump is kicked out or assassinated, the shooting might start at that point, and I don't think anybody could stop it.
No. Well, thank you very much, Mike, for all you do. I really appreciate your time.
All right.
Have a good one.
Same to you. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Angie in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hi, just really quickly, a quick FYI for you guys in the audience. According to the Gateway Pundit, Trump is back on top today with the USC LA Times Daybreak tracking poll.
Okay.
45.3 to 43.7.
Well, the only polls that have Hillary ahead are those in the corporate media, NBC, CNN, and so forth, and Reuters, and they've admitted they changed their polling methodology. They're putting the third-party candidates in or out. Maybe they took away undecided and just sort of assigned those to Hillary. They're playing all kinds of skullduggery to try and keep her numbers up. But the trend is definitely there. Trump is on the rise. Hillary is going down. She's going to take the entire establishment down with her. And the Democrats are in a panic because they're in exactly the same place the Republicans were in when Richard Nixon won his second term in office, dragging that whole Watergate mess in with him. And it took the GOP a decade to recover from that, and it'll take the Democrats a decade to recover from Hillary Clinton.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you very much for the update. Now then, same to you. Thank you for the phone call. Over at Tomato Bubble, they have another article. You've probably seen in the corporate media over the last couple of days where all these billionaires are coming on out, you know, supporting Hillary Clinton. Michael Bloomberg is out there. Cuban is out there. And they're all, we've got to support Hillary Clinton. And you would think they would side with one of their own because Donald Trump is also a billionaire. But what it really comes on down to is these billionaires are as rich as they are today because the U.S. economic political system is totally corrupted, and they don't want to let go of that. They know that if they if they force Hillary Clinton into that White House, they'll continue to get subsidies, favors, bailouts, tax breaks, cheap financing, stock manipulation, corporate welfare, inside information, cheap immigrant labor, unlimited outsourcing. And, of course, the means to beat down smaller competitors with endless regulations that are designed to favor large corporations and prevent upstarts. That's what they want, and that's what Hillary will give them. They did not give her all that money on Wall Street to have Hillary save them from a new 9/11. That's just pure USDA choice bovine excrement. Okay, apparently Paul Ryan got a standing ovation at a Koch donors retreat after bashing Donald Trump's trade policies. According to Nayland, Paul Ryan is a soulless globalist grown in a petri dish in D.C. who puts corporate America over Wisconsin workers. Yep. Now, over in Michigan, a recall petition for Governor Snyder has been greenlit. They can start collecting signatures. If they get 798,000 signatures, the recall will go on to the November ballot. People are just getting fed up. Now, there was a press conference earlier today, and it has to do with one of the numerous lawsuits that have been filed regarding election fraud during the primaries. Citizens Oversight is pushing this case forward. Now, they filed with the California courts to force a recount, and the court basically said, well, a lot of this is moot because the state of California has already certified the primary election. So we're not ready to take that question on of finding a way to decertify it. But they did agree that down in San Diego, there was a lot of odd stuff going on, and they have ordered election officials in San Diego to complete an audit encompassing the 37% of the ballots cast that were never counted. That's what happened in San Diego. 37% of the ballots were simply not counted. And the court has ordered a complete 100% audit of the election. Now this is going to get interesting because we've already gotten reports from San Diego that those uncounted ballots are being shredded. And that means somebody is going to go to jail. And I guarantee you will not see this story reported in the corporate media. Now, Trump is out there and he understands election fraud is a reality. And Trump is out there saying people without ID, they can vote 10 times. Because fraud is very easy, the way this system is set up. The electronic voting machines are wide open to hacking. Bev Harris demonstrated that. Now, that North Carolina voter ID case that got struck down by the appeals court, it's probably going to get to the Supreme Court. And Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton has suggested strongly, has strongly suggested Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg should recuse herself from the hearing on the North Carolina voter ID case because of her comments about Donald Trump. Clearly, she is biased. Now, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit in Richmond ruled that the law somehow discriminated against African Americans. because apparently African Americans wander around this country without things like driver's licenses. Now, the law that was struck down would have required to show voter identification when casting their ballots. Other restrictions that the court threw out included scaling back early voting, that prevented residents from registering and voting on the same day, which means the registrations can't be checked for duplicates. And also the ability for voters to cast ballots outside their assigned precincts. Every single one of those leave open a red carpet path to election fraud by going from precinct to precinct and registering and voting and registering and voting and registering and voting. They're trying to throw this thing to Hillary, even at the federal court level. And they're already starting the counter-propaganda. They understand, we know about election fraud, how bad it is. Whether it's Bev Harris' site, blackboxvoting.org, the HBO documentary, Hacking Democracy. Back during Bill Clinton's presidency, there was a book out called Vote Scam by the Collier brothers. Very hard to get these days. Somehow sort of disappeared. But we know election fraud is real. John F. Kennedy, as much as a good president he turned out to be, he did in fact steal that election from Richard Nixon. It happens. So already they're lining up the experts to say, it couldn't possibly happen. And you're just, what a ridiculous tinfoil hat, wingnut kook conspiracy theory. And so they have this Hans Knoll, who's an associate professor of political science at Georgetown University, talk about being inside the system, and saying you'd have to have a lot of shenanigans in a lot of different states to tip things. It isn't enough here. It's just completely unlikely. Now, that is ridiculous for a wide variety of reasons. Obviously, if you have the Democratic Party in all 50 states and they're all on board with shoving Hillary down America's throat, they're in a position to be influencing the local elections. But over and above that, remember, the national elections are tabulated by a privately owned company owned by the corporate media with zero civilian or government oversight, no audits, no double checks, and they have been caught changing the results in the past. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go to the phones here. Steve in California. Aloha. I guess you have one more thing you needed to share with us?
Yeah, Michael, I got a question on Larry Nichols. I know he's got a long history working with the Clintons back in the Arkansas days, but I listened to an old Pete Santilli show back, it's his 517th show he did, and you can go on YouTube and listen to it. But at the 1 hour and 9 minutes, he starts talking about hits, assassinations, and killings he did outside the country and inside the country. Do you hold any of this valid, any credibility on this guy?
Yeah, I've had him on the show, and he does seem like the real deal. And, obviously he needs to be careful because there is no statute of limitations on murder. But at this point, I mean, Larry Nichols was really out there vocal during Bill Clinton's first term in office. And then my understanding is that a lot of pressure was put on him, and he kind of just got on with his life. He's very ill now, and he understands he doesn't have very long to live, and so this is why he's coming out and he's going public, because he realizes the danger of letting this couple of corruption continue to dominate American politics.
Yeah, I was just wondering about that, and I know the statute of limitations, there is none, but media's never talked about any of this stuff about him. And
no, they can't.
I'm surprised that nobody's pushed this issue, but maybe because he's so close to death, they don't want to mess with it now.
No. The reason the corporate media is not going to talk about Larry Nichols is because inevitably it's going to bring more public attention to what Nichols is saying about the Clintons, about the cocaine and gun running on Amina, Arkansas, about CIA involvement in the drug trade, about money laundering inside all these banks, which we understand is going on again today. What we're seeing with HSBC and the Attorney General and the head of the FBI is just a larger version of what Bill Clinton was doing in Arkansas as governor.
Right. All right. Thanks, Michael.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call. Now then, speaking of Judicial Watch, they are still fighting back and forth over getting Hillary Clinton to testify under oath regarding this email scandal. And U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan is trying to work his way through this thing. He's under a tremendous amount of pressure. Now, Hillary's people and the Department of Justice lawyers are saying that Judicial Watch already has everything they need from all the other people. They don't need to impose on Hillary as she's running for president. Well, here's the problem. I don't care if she's running for Pope. Right now, she is a private citizen. And as a private citizen, when she is subpoenaed to testify, she must. Now, Hillary's lawyers have come on out and said that they would be agreeable to having Hillary answer questions in writing from Judicial Watch, but not in a deposition, supposedly for convenience sake. But obviously, if she's answering questions in writing, she's not under oath. And that's where the trouble is, because Hillary has already been caught committing perjury. And that's a felony violation. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, as an example of the kind of tactics being used against Donald Trump, and you need to follow this along. This probably was inspired by Theresa May over in Britain saying, yeah, of course we're going to use nuclear weapons. Now, MSNBC, Joe Scarborough, claimed that Donald Trump met with an unnamed national security expert and reportedly asked why the U.S. couldn't use its nuclear weapons stockpile. Donald Trump has denied this ever happened. And what is the response of the media? Oh, obviously Donald Trump must be lying. He has to be lying. This is desperation on the cusp of madness. There isn't anything Donald Trump can say or do that is not going to be turned into an attack. The good news is we all recognize what we're seeing. So let's get over to the war zones. Emphasis on the plural. Turkey has now come on out and said that Barack Obama is lying. The United States was behind the failed coup. They now have 2 named masterminds. And Erdogan has gone further than that, saying that the West supports terror. They're using terrorism to achieve their geopolitical aims. And we know that's true. We have these declassified U.S. government documents that Judicial Watch got, backed up by the WikiLeaks emails showing that, yes, Barack Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton were supplying weapons to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria to use against Bashar al-Assad. When Erdogan is right, he is right. And one of the reasons Turkey is very angry about the botched up coup, it's cost them a lot, about $100 billion. When you tally up all the damage caused by the battles, the loss of warplanes, helicopters, and so forth, the costs of additional time for all the first responders to restore order. And they did take a major hit. Now, maybe Erdogan is signaling that he's willing to kiss and make up for the appropriate bribe now that we know that the U.S. is in the habit of issuing bribes to other countries like Iran. Meanwhile, a Turkish lawyer has filed a criminal complaint against the chief of staff and 2 other senior U.S. officials for being part of the coup. The Turkish prosecutor is accusing the CIA and FBI of involvement in the coup. Meanwhile, over at that Incirlik Air Base, it's surrounded not just by 7,000 Turkish troops, but by thousands of Turkish citizens saying this base must be closed. They want to kick them on out. Now, what is going to happen to the people inside there? We don't know. Probably they'd be sent home. The real question is those nuclear weapons that were put into this base to wag at Russia, trying to provoke a response. Erdogan might just say, fair trade for the $100 billion your coup attempt cost me. We'll just keep these. And that would create a second nuclear power in the Middle East, rivaling Israel, and not at all friendly to U.S. interests. Now, all these fail-safes and codes and everything that are on the nuclear weapons are designed to prevent unauthorized or inadvertent detonation while the weapons are under the control of the U.S. military. If Erdogan has possession of the actual weapons, it's only a matter of time before they bypass all of that and are able to deploy them. That's just the ugly, ugly reality. And behind all of that, the EU is very upset over the fact that Turkey and Russia are talking about a new oil pipeline. Because those pipelines can literally reshape the economies of entire regions. And EU officials are concerned that this new pipeline between Russia and Turkey could force Europe to become even more reliant on Russia's gas supply, as the gas line would bypass Ukraine and potential suppliers in the Caspian. So that's in play, the oil pipelines. Now, they're doing great gains over in Aleppo, which is why you're not hearing about Syria in the corporate media. It's going to be this generation's version of Vietnam. But the Syrian army is releasing videos of captured caches of ISIS weapons made in the USA carrying NATO markings. Some of the weapons they found were the TOW missiles, the Milan anti-tank weapon. And what we're hearing from Aleppo is that they've opened up these humanitarian corridors. They're freeing these people. They're absolutely ecstatic and jubilant, and you're not going to see that on the corporate media because these Syrian people are welcoming their liberators. And the U.S. myth is still that it is the Syrian government and the Syrian military that are the threat to the Syrian people. You wouldn't know it to look at these videos. Apparently, there's another major event underway. Russia is now launching sea-launched cruise missiles, targeting the rebel ammo dumps on the Syrian border. The blasts were heard all the way to Hatay province, which means they got something really, really big. I'm going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates. Welcome back to our network here. We're talking about the ongoing wars. Syria looks to be all but over. They're cleaning up Aleppo right now. And rather than allow the American people to witness the latest version of the defeat of Vietnam, they're shifting the focus down to Libya. Forget about Syria. We're going to change the focus. And the government has a long history of doing that. Remember when the Marine barracks in Beirut were bombed? Huge embarrassment for the U.S. What happened 24 hours later? They invaded Grenada. Oh, we've got a new war to forget all about how all those dead Marines. We've got a new war. That's what they're doing here. They're getting kicked out of Syria. They don't want you to think about that, so we're going to go escalate things over in Libya. And Obama is out there saying that bombing Libya is in the U.S. national security interest. No, it isn't. It's all about oil and money, and in this case, saving face. Now, Obama says this new operation is a 30-day mission, but we shouldn't hold him to that 30 days. The last U.S. attack on Libya back in 2011 went way beyond its initial schedule. And the White House continues to reject the need for congressional authorization, which is unconstitutional. Under the Constitution, only Congress can declare war. Now, Obama is trying to justify this renewed interest in Libya by saying, well, we were not sufficiently attentive to the Libya aftermath. After we bombed them and put in our puppet regime, we should have been paying closer attention. And that's why we're back in this mess again. No, it isn't. They're heightening things up in Libya so that we're not paying attention to what's going on in Syria. Now, Fars News is calling it Libya War II. For interventionists, it's still deliberate and self-serving. And there's an interesting quote out of this article. Military experts and officials at the Pentagon are clear. The U.S.-led war on terror has failed. Team Obama and company cannot bomb ISIS out of the Middle East and North Africa. What Fars News does not understand, Team Obama isn't trying to bomb ISIS out of the Middle East and North Africa. Team Obama is bombing the Middle East and North Africa to force them to accept U.S. puppet regimes. And ISIS is merely the excuse for public consumption. Now, Italy has agreed to allow the U.S. to use their air bases for Libya strikes. So they got brought in on board this latest situation. Now, over in Libya, the parliament in Tobruk says they do not accept the U.S. rates. Remember, Libya actually has two governments. They have the one chosen by the Libyan people that the U.S. pretends does not exist, and then they have the one the U.S. is trying to force down their throats, claiming this was formed by the United Nations. Of course, any country would accept a government made by the United Nations. Why would you possibly refuse that? Whatever happened to the idea of democracy? We'll pick our own leaders. Thank you very much. Mind your own business. But that's what's going on. The U.S. went in, killed Gaddafi, destroyed the gold dinar. Remember, one of those leaked emails confirmed. Getting rid of that gold dinar was a major motive for the attack on Libya and the death of Muammar Gaddafi. It's all about the money. And then they installed this puppet regime. The people of Libya said, we don't want that. At one point, the puppet regime was literally holding their meetings on an abandoned car carrier at the harbor. I don't know where they're holed up now. But that's what the U.S. is doing. They're bombing the Libyan people until they agree to have foreign rule. Meanwhile, over in Russia, specifically Crimea, the other day, Russia announced that they were going to be sending more military assets into Crimea in response to NATO continuing to arm and fortify their side of the border with Russia. And, of course, the United States immediately came out, you can't put weapons in Crimea. That's absolutely ridiculous. And, of course, Russia came back to the U.S. and said, it's our country. You know, you're putting your weapons all over Europe. We're just putting weapons inside our own territory. And it is rather weird, some of the stuff coming out of the State Department, like the other day when Kerry demanded that the Syrian government and Russia stop attacking the terrorists, which drew a certain amount of ridicule and abuse in the back channels. Interestingly enough, there was a 10-person delegation from the National Assembly and Senate of France that went to Crimea. And in their farewell press conference, they issued a statement. It is time for the international community to recognize that Crimea is, of their own free will and two referendums, part of Russia. Now, down in Italy, there's a political party that is gaining ground. It's the Northern League. And it also recognizes Crimea as part of Russia, and they are starting to talk about an exit from the European Union. All these carefully laid plans of the globalists and the New World Orders, they're all falling apart because they didn't really think them all the way through. Let's grab a quick phone call. Gary in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I got two things. I got a question and a statement. First, if Hillary gets in, I don't think we will ever recover from that.
It'll be the end of the country.
I think so, too. Something that I think Trump should bring up is last time that you had a Clinton in office, you had Glass-Steagall, which allowed everybody to get upside down in their house and lose their home. You had Social Security get raided. You had NAFTA, which took thousands and millions of jobs and manufacturing jobs away from this country.
Well, we have to be careful. Trump goes after Bill Clinton's legacy. All Hillary has to say is, well, I'm not going to be Bill Clinton. And she probably is going to be, but she's got an immediate defense. Donald Trump needs to focus on Hillary herself and what Hillary herself has done. And what Bill Clinton did really is kind of irrelevant. And I know it's grist for a lot of commentary on the independent media, but we do need to stay focused on Hillary's role in all of those incidents.
Well, there's a lot to keep focused on Hillary. The other thing I wanted to know, if John Jr. wouldn't have went down in that airplane, and Hillary would have lost the Senate in New York, and then she could have been Secretary of State, and then she couldn't be where she is right now. Is that correct?
No, actually, the reason Hillary wanted to be a senator was so that she could say she had congressional experience. Then she wanted to be Secretary of State, so she had foreign policy chops to build her resume to be the president. And yes, she wanted that Senate seat, and John F. Kennedy Jr. had decided he was going to run for that same seat. And with his family name, he probably would have won. And shortly after the airplane was taken out of the sky. And there are so many reasons to see that this was not an accident. He was a very well-qualified pilot. There was actually an issue of Newsweek that carried the story of his announcement of his run for the Senate. It was literally yanked from the newsstands and sent back to Newsweek for destruction and never replaced. It's a missing issue.
But she could have went without being a senator. She could have been Secretary of...
No, I don't think so, because it was her term as a senator that allowed her to run in 2008. And then when it looked like she was...
So it was...
Hang on, let me...
That's what I'm saying. So it was a progression.
Yeah, it was a progression.
All of those things had to fall in place for her to be where she is today.
Basically, that's it. But in 2008, she hadn't been Secretary of State yet. So when Obama and Clinton had that private meeting, was in the news about they met in this house and nobody knows what they talked about, I think the deal was struck then. Hillary was going to back off, let Obama have his term in office, and he would make her Secretary of State so that she would come into 2016 with a much stronger portfolio, as it were.
All right. Thanks. You have a good day.
All right. Same to you. Thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Randy in Texas. Aloha, Randy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I'd like to ask you if you've heard anything about the GOP trying to oust Trump. It seems to be a big story on MSNBC, but I'm not seeing it anywhere else.
Well, they're trying to put out this idea that Donald Trump is going to drop out of the race after just, a couple of weeks of being the candidate. And there's nothing on this from the Donald Trump campaign. On Twitter, they're saying, no, it's not happening. And this appears to be one of two things. Either this is a sleazy trick to try and discourage and undermine Trump's supporters across the country, or the Republican National Committee is making plans for what they're going to do after he's assassinated.
Okay, yeah, they're saying that they're supposed to be doing an intervention with Donald Trump to try to bring him back in line.
That could trigger the revolution. I mean, we're all at the breaking point right now. That could trigger the revolution.
Okay, I didn't see anything about it on Fox or CNN, and it's just been spewing out on MSNBC all day long.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's MSNBC for you. I mean, they did that thing with Joe Scarborough, where they tried to claim that Donald Trump was asking an unnamed foreign policy advisor, why can't I use nuclear weapons? And Trump came on out and said it didn't happen, and the first thing MSNBC said, Donald Trump must be lying. He must be lying. How could you think that we would get the story wrong? Of course, being the corporate media, they always get the story wrong. All right, Randy, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Getting back to the international scene, very bizarre story. This is being reported by Press TV. And apparently somebody got this on video, where these two Israeli soldiers simply confiscated a bicycle from an 8-year-old Palestinian girl and then proceeded to stomp it into wreckage in front of her and then throw it in the bushes. Now, as Ron White would say, you're a really manly man, aren't you? To beat up on an 8-year-old kid and ruin her bicycle. And it does betray a certain mindset going on over there. Now, in a larger context, there's a big stink going on over in Britain's National Archives. There was a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit requesting information about Britain's cooperation with Israel regarding the development of nuclear weapons. All those documents have magically disappeared. Okay, let's see. I think we talked to Gary in Florida. No, it's Mark in North Carolina is the next call. Mark, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Doing on, Mike. Mike, two things. One is I heard today that WikiLeaks. I heard it before, but I actually saw it online that WikiLeaks is getting ready to blow the boom on Mrs. Slick Willie with saying that she was involved. They have an email showing that she was definitely involved in the gun running.
Well, they've already dumped that. It's already out. They've already done that data dump, and it's not just WikiLeaks. Yeah, Judicial Watch got this official U.S. government document, declassified, that said, they're supporting and arming and training ISIS and Al-Qaeda at the same time they're telling us these are our mortal enemies.
Well, this should be it then. I mean, not only for her. I mean, this should be it for the whole U.S. government. I mean, it's time to bring this sucker down and get rid of both of these parties.
Well, we have to get this information out to the public. And the corporate media isn't going to do that. The corporate media isn't touching any of this stuff. Their job is to convince you everything's hunky-dory, vote the incumbents back in, buy, be happy, spend money, borrow money, breed us workers and soldiers, and all will be well. And that's basically what they do. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, as you've probably been hearing, the U.S. and Israel are negotiating a new aid package for Israel. Actually, it's not really a negotiation. Israel is out there saying, give us more, and the U.S. administration is saying, yes, massa. And it's a major, major increase in the amount of your money going into Israel's pockets. And by the way, Israel is the largest single recipient of U.S. foreign aid. All of it illegal under U.S. law, because of the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act and the Glenn Act. It is a crime for the U.S. government to give any of your tax money to any nation that is in possession of nuclear weapons technology that refuses to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Act and allow IAEA inspections. But Israel says, it's a great deal, it's not enough, you must give us more. And we know what the back channel discussion is probably going to sound like is, give us more. I'll tell the world who really did 9/11, and it'll be worse for you than for us. Everybody expects Israel to do things like this. So, you in America, you'll be in trouble. Meanwhile, down at Oberlin College, there's a big stink going on, where there was this professor, on his own time, made some posts to Facebook suggesting that Israeli and United States intelligence services were behind terror attacks. And the college said that merely suggesting Israel is behind false flag terror attacks is a form of anti-Semitism, and they put him on paid leave. Actually, it's a her, Dr. Joy Kariga. Now remember, she was not saying this on her job in her college classroom. She was saying it in her private time on her Facebook post. And if you want proof that we're being spied on to try and control us, there it is. She made the obvious conclusion. Israel is behind false flag terror. We know they do that. They've been caught doing it. The attack on USS Liberty, they were trying to frame Egypt for it. This is what they do. There's a former Mossad agent, Victor Ostrovsky, and he wrote a book called By Way of Deception, which is taken from the motto of the Mossad, By Way of Deception, Thou Shalt Do War. It is a fact Israel engages in these. And for them to take the position that even suggesting Israel is involved in false flag terror is a form of anti-Semitism, that's ridiculous. That's like saying criticism of the actions of the Nazi is just hatred of the German people. That's the ridiculous extreme this tyranny has now reached. So let's turn on down to Saudi Arabia. Now, a couple of months back, there was a big stink where Saudi Arabia objected to be put on this United Nations list of armies that kill and maim children. And they put a huge amount of pressure on UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, got pressure from the United States as well, and Saudi Arabia was removed from the list. All is well, until today, where the UN put them right back on that list. And the Saudis are out there saying, oh, this is horrible. Have you seen how the world operates? All of these countries want to go on out and do these horrible atrocities. They just don't think anybody should talk about it. Whether it's the Saudis or the Israelis or the United States, the CIA torture centers, yeah, we're doing it, but if you're a real American, you'll pretend you don't know about it. Even more alarming is a story that came out of Politico.com. Get ready for Obama's October surprise in Iraq. And the indications are that in October, just in time for the election, Obama is going to uncork a major military incursion into Iraq for whatever pretext. They've got nuclear weapons again or something. And they're already having to deny that this has anything to do with the election. It's just a coincidence, really. It's just a coincidence that we're going to go on in and push that war agenda just before Hillary runs on a war platform. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, right now, Hillary Clinton is outspending Donald Trump 98-1. The big money is all on Hillary's side. But Trump has got some very creative people working for him. They just put out a new ad, and it's basically a spoof on the Pac-Man video game. You have to be my age to remember those things. And it has Hillary eating the missing emails in a Pac-Man game. It's funny as all heck here. Now, getting on back to the war zones. Story coming out of the original antiwar.com. U.S. military pivots to Africa, and the news is grim. Basically having made a disaster zone of the Middle East and not really been all that beneficial to Ukraine and much of Europe. The U.S. is now moving on to Africa. And so the U.S. Africa Command, which sounds an awful lot like the Nazis' Africa Corps, is in there talking about how we need to go in and we need to start cleansing all these countries and remove them of their freedom and independence. I'm sorry, we remove them of ISIS. That's the new catch-all excuse for invading a country. Oh, there's ISIS over there. Boom. Oh, there's ISIS over there. Boom. Oh, there's ISIS over there. Boom. That's how it works now. Meanwhile, out in the Pacific here, part of RIMPAC 16, apparently the doctrine for the training is preparation for an Asian conflict. And so as part of RIMPAC 16, they have warships and submarines from 13 countries carrying out a drill to prepare for a war with China or North Korea. They're rattling the sabers just as hard as they can. Now, China has responded by saying that they are getting ready for war at sea themselves. And that's a wise and prudent thing to do. And again, we know who the aggressor is here. Now, I think we're in serious trouble when it comes to our military because the U.S. Air Force has just officially declared the F-35 to be combat ready. Now, it's got a dodgy radar. It relies on an insecure database. They still can't get the so-called glass cockpit views to line up. Its networked radar target system will display multiple targets for a single entry or miss targets completely. The software for the cannon still is not going to be delivered until 2019, but the U.S. Air Force has declared the F-35 is combat ready. I guess the theory is that when the Russians and Chinese see the F-35 coming at them, they're going to die of laughter. That's our new strategic policy. We're going to laugh them to death. Reminds me of that Monty Python episode where they had the world's deadliest joke and they deployed it against the Nazis. Now, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in The Hague has, after all this time, determined that the late Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic was in fact not responsible for war crimes committed during the 1992 to 1995 Bosnian War. Remember, we were all being told, oh, he's a war criminal, we have to go on in and mess things around here. And the trial chamber that had already convicted former Bosnian Serb President Radovan Karadzic of war crimes and put him in prison for 40 years, unanimously concluded Milosevic was not part of a joint criminal enterprise to victimize Muslims and Croats during the Bosnian War. It's a bit late, given that Milosevic died in prison. So let's talk about the economy now. Bank shares are plunging across Europe in the wake of stress tests that showed most European banks are not in a position to survive another crisis. And people are getting very, very nervous over there. Fitch is warning of a potential $3.8 trillion loss for investment-grade sovereign bond investors. And apparently people are starting to seek safe haven investments, metals, other hard assets. They're getting away from some of these papers issued by corporations and especially by governments. Story in Investment Watch blog. The foreign appetite for U.S. debt dump accelerates. They're trying to get out of those treasury bonds because there's a bond bubble. There aren't enough living Americans, even with all the illegal immigrants and refugees, to ever redeem all of that paper. Who's dumb enough to buy these treasury bonds? I think the Federal Reserve is just printing up money and buying them all back. And they'll dump the losses on you, the American people. Okay, let's see. We're going to go to the phones here. Rob in Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I've been job hunting lately, and I saw this. I'm going to set it up a little bit. I've been listening to you probably since 2004 or 2005, and at the time I was still attempting to be a day trader, and you spoke of gambler's ruin back then, and it made me realize that I was in absolutely the wrong business because I'd never been a gambler, and I was going through that cycle right at the time. Anyway, I have put that on my resume that I was attempting to be a day trader, and so when I do these job searches now, they will have traders in amongst them. And so I saw this job ad today, and it says fixed income security trader. Wells Fargo will consider qualified candidates with criminal histories in a manner consistent with the requirements of applicable local, state, and federal laws.
Okay. Was this a Craigslist ad? I mean, it seems a little bit out there.
No, it was Indeed, which is supposed to be the one that carries everything. So, but no, it's a serious ad, and that's that is you go to it and it's a Wells Fargo ad. But I just looked at it and I said, "Oh, Mike's gonna love this."
That's amazing. Well, a funny thing happened when computer hacking first started to become a problem, and back then they could still find the hackers. Instead of throwing them in jail, they all got hired by the computer security companies. And so in this day and age of unparalleled banker corruption, it would almost make sense that the jobs they do have out there, because they're letting people go, tellers, low-level staff and everything, the only people that they're hiring, they need to keep the crimes going. And one of the big brain boosts that Wall Street actually got was from the drawback on NASA, because all those computer programmers that were writing code to go to other planets and do science, they all got hired to develop these high-frequency trading algorithms.
I felt like calling him up and say, geez, I don't have a criminal history. What do I need to qualify? If I go out to the old folks' home and start grabbing gold fillings out of the residents' teeth, will that get me there?
Yeah, that probably would do it. That would probably absolutely do that.
Okay, thanks, Mike. That's what I got for you. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure I buy that ad, but who knows in this day and age. Now, getting back to the serious economic news, we are continuing to see default rates spiking here in the U.S., and yet somehow the U.S. stock market remains at a record. Doesn't really make a lot of sense out there. The Asian markets took a fairly moderate slap across the face last night, but here in the U.S., of course, the markets are in the green. Huzzah, 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 huzzah. Office Depot, which failed in its efforts to merge with Staples and is trying to reorganize to continue as Office Depot alone, is announcing they're going to close 300 more stores for a total of 700. Now, call me silly, but when you're running a retail business, closing the retail outlets doesn't seem like a really smart idea. Of course, you need to remember that Office Depot and these other stores all flourished in the day of home businesses and entrepreneurial activity. And that has been all but erased from our economy because the laws have been rewritten so that small home businesses and startups are just crushed under the regulatory compliance weight to shift the bias toward those large established corporations who can be counted on to write very heavy campaign checks every election season. Ben Moss Jewelers is closing all 54 of their locations, and it's over there by Winnipeg, but they've been in business for around 100 years. And jewelry stores, like beauty shops, tend to be recession-proof, but apparently not. Elmhurst Dairy over in Queens is closing after nearly 100 years. They'll be laying off 273 employees in October. So the reality on the ground belies the claims that the economy is doing great under the current leadership. It just isn't there. Now, the other day we were talking about how the executives from Sports Authority, which has gone out of business, were requesting an aggregate of $2.85 million in additional bonuses for these 4 executives to sort of incentivize them to doing the job properly as they put this sporting goods chain completely out of business. And the bankruptcy judge came on out and said, "Are you kidding?" and turned it down. Now, last October, the federal government brought literally a criminal case against Goldman Sachs, one of their bankers, over improperly obtained information from the Federal Reserve. And all these months later, it's all been settled. Goldman has been fined an amount that basically is 0.1% of their revenues. That's their punishment for criminal theft of confidential Federal Reserve information. By golly, that'll teach them. That'll make sure they never go on out and cheat again, as it were. So let's talk about the immigration refugee meltdown, because it is. Police have arrested 900 Syrians in England and Wales for crimes including rape and child abuse. And some of it was pretty sickening. And it's a huge, huge problem. And we're seeing all these governments say, well, we've got to adapt to their culture and civil. No, they don't. Here's why we need a controlled immigration policy. When you come to the United States legally and you go through the process, first of all, you're vetted that you don't have any contagious diseases, that you have skills that will be a benefit to the country. But most importantly, you are administered an oath that reminds you you are in a new country whose laws you must respect. And all these illegal immigrants and refugees don't go through that. They come on in and just sort of have this attitude of you have to change your world to look just like the countries we left behind, which were in such sorry state, that's why we ran, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Teddy Roosevelt really did have it right. If you want to come to the United States through the legal immigration process, welcome. I hope it's not a disappointment. But understand, you're in our country, our home. You will respect our local culture. You will abide by our laws. And that's just, it's not only common sense, it's common courtesy. Now, apparently, over in Britain, members of the Parliament are slamming what they're calling the lamentable response to the refugee crisis by the European Union. And what that basically means is Brussels isn't changing anything. Juncker's already out there saying, I don't care how many people get raped or stabbed or axed or whatever, we're going to continue with the open borders policy. And that, too, is splitting up the European Union. The Czech president is now calling for a ban on all migration in order to prevent terrorism in their country. Gee, what a wonderful idea. Why didn't I think of that? Actually, more importantly, why doesn't anybody else who's in charge of a country think about that? Instead, we're going to welcome the refugees and just spend more money being hopelessly, inadequately prepared for what's going to happen. Apparently, over in Great Britain, Scotland Yard is getting ready to release what they're calling the Hercules officers. These are guys who are dressed up like actors in a dystopian movie of the future. Just complete body armor, armored vehicles, heavy weapons, military-grade sniper rifles, Kevlar, and they all get to ride around on these high-speed BMW GS 800 Scrambler motorcycles so they can get there fast. Looks like they're getting ready for the next false flag. And just like every other government, it's not going to work. Have you noticed that everything the governments are doing, supposedly to protect us from crime and terror, does not protect us from crime and terror, but ultimately takes away more of our privacy, more of our freedoms, more of our rights? You'd almost think it was intentional. I mean, really. Poland has decided to tell the European Union to get out of its own internal constitutional affairs. What's Brussels going to do? Reinvade Poland? Oh, the Poles blew up our Brussels radio station. We must invade. We must invade. The EU is in serious, serious trouble. They're holding that together with duct tape and baling wire here. Over in the Daily Mail, they have an article warning the EU is close to death. The EU trade chief is out there saying that if this deal with Canada collapses, it could unravel pretty much everything. Now, the EU is suffering from two problems. One is, of course, the backlash from the refugee crisis. The other is that the European Union was created with a built-in self-destruct device called the European Central Bank, which, like every other private central bank, issues all the public currency as a loan at interest, creating, by design, more debt than money with which to pay that debt until the debt starts collapsing all the member nations. Cyprus, Greece, Italy's now on the verge. And they won't let go of it. Now, as you know, we're coming up on the Rio Olympics. A lot of people worried it's perfect place for a false flag attack to start the next war. But everybody is still going back and forth over this attempt to ban the Russian athletes. And there's a political agenda here. And there's an article that came out in Counterpunch that gives a very good timeline of how this was all set up. It was a PR operation. And there actually doesn't seem to be any evidence anything was going on. The entire McLaren report, on which this banning fever started, was based supposedly on confessions from Russian scientists who are now living in the United States. And they even went so far as to demand all Russian athletes be banned, even if they've never tested positive for performance enhancement drugs. So the U.S. wants to beat Russia without that messy business of actually having to athletically compete. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I tell you, the corporate media has no shame. Apparently, at one of Donald Trump's campaign stops today, there was a woman with a very loud crying baby right in front of the podium. And Trump asked her if she would be kind enough to move away because the baby was causing a ruckus. So immediately the media's out there, Donald Trump hates babies. He threw a baby out of his rally. How could he? There is nothing Donald Trump can say or do that is not going to be turned into a weapon against him. All righty. Now then, interesting little story, and this even made Fox News. Apparently, there is a D.C. Metro cop who's been arrested for trying to help ISIS. Ooh, ISIS is inside Washington, D.C. We've got to get prepared. And as usual, it turns out this guy was being set up by an undercover FBI officer. It's another entrapment, because entrapping people to generate headlines is certainly a lot easier than actually going out and finding real criminals or terrorists, isn't it? You know, we're trying to save money here. We're trying to be on our budget here. And if we go out and make up make-believe crimes, then, we look good and we spend less tax dollars. Sure they do. Now, there's another story that's coming out over here, and this is out in California. Not too long ago, there was a PG&E gas explosion. PG&E's got a vile reputation, if you remember the Aaron Brockovich story and the hexavalent chromium. And there's a jury already seated in a criminal case against PG&E, and federal prosecutors have filed papers to lower the $562 million in fines down to just $6 million. Because after all, it's a corporation. We can't punish corporations no matter how many people they blow up. This explosion took place in 2010, killed 8 people. And the excuse given is, well, trying to get that $500 million fine, it would have just required prosecutors to give the jury complicated instructions, and so we're just going to let PG&E off the hook. Instead of $500 million, $6 million fine. Do you need any more proof that we are living in a fascist economic dictatorship? Because we are. Now, you remember the case about Alton Sterling? Was one of the many victims of seeming police brutality. This story is getting really weird. Okay? The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Middle District of Louisiana has announced that they've issued a federal court order sealing Alton Sterling's autopsy results from being made public. Then they followed it up with a second federal court order sealing the first court order in order to hide just who it was who said, we need to cover this up. We'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, I was under the impression that following all of these suspicious terror attacks in France, there was a state of emergency and a police presence. And Holland was promising people that they were going to be safe from the bad guys. Well, apparently not, because 27 Chinese tourists were attacked on this airport bus on the way to Charles de Gaulle Airport. And the attackers pepper sprayed the driver, hit 2 tourists, and stole all their luggage. And the article goes on to say basically that the gangs like to target the Asian tourists in the belief that they carry large sums of money in their luggage. Actually, that's not it, and I learned that firsthand here in Hawaii. The criminals like to target the Asian tourists because in Japan and China, being the victim of a crime is a shameful thing. And many Chinese and Japanese who are victims of crimes here in Hawaii will not even call the police. And we discovered that some years ago. Claire and I were up on the North Shore just enjoying the fact that we live here in Hawaii. And we found this Japanese family, young couple, little tiny baby. And their rental car had been entered without any indications of forced entry, and all their possessions taken, including their passports. And they didn't know what to do. And we were having trouble communicating because my Japanese is very, very weak, and their English was almost non-existent. And they kept saying, we don't want to call the police, we're so ashamed, we're so ashamed. And I said, no, you have nothing to be ashamed of. And we're going to have to call the authorities because you're going to have to get your passports back somehow. So we were able to find out what hotel they were staying at and contact the concierge to try and set in motion the mechanism for them to get emergency passports to go back home. But it's true. The Asians feel being the victim of a crime is a shameful thing, and very often they will not report it. And the criminals will take advantage of that. This is a funny story somebody just sent me, and I'm presenting it as a humorous story. There is an article over in Russia Insider that Franklin Graham, the son of Billy Graham, the evangelical leader, is convinced Hillary Clinton is showing signs of demonic possession. I cannot for the life of me imagine any demon that would want to get close to her, but that's what Franklin Graham says is going on here. Now, getting on back to current events here and the police and stinky badges, this is another one of these really horrible things. Over in Kansas City, there was this woman, and the police came to visit her because of a disturbance call. Somebody in the neighborhood was making noise. They weren't sure who, so they knocked on this woman's door. And she thought it was friends that she was expecting to come on over, so she opened the door without restraining her dog, who ran outside tail wagging. This is all caught on the home security camera. And when the dog retreated from the police, one of them opened fire. Shot the dog, killed it. Woman had had the dog for 10 years. It really is out of control. There's even a name for it now. They're calling it puppycide. This tendency of the American police to simply shoot any dogs they encounter. The other day we were talking about this ridiculous story where this guy was stopped in his car. There were crumbs from sugar frosting on a donut on the floor of the car, and the cops tested it with their portable field testing kit twice. It came back positive for meth both times. They arrested this guy, threw him in jail. The police laboratory came back and said, it is sugar. And I thought you police all knew a donut when you saw one. Well, this appears to be an ongoing problem. It's not an isolated incident. We mentioned this before when it happened. Okay, but there was this guy, Alexander J. Bernstein, was pulled over by the police. His hobby is making soap, homemade soap. The police pulled him over. They searched the car. They found 2 bars of soap wrapped in plastic. Their portable field testing kit identified it as cocaine. They threw this guy in jail for a month. He lost his job. He lost his apartment. He lost all his possessions. Missed having Thanksgiving with his 17-month-old son. All over soap. And the state released Bernstein from jail, but he's stuck with $32,000 in court costs, and everything he had in life is now gone. There is clearly a problem with these portable field testing kits. And maybe the reason for the problem is that civil forfeiture situation. Oh, our testing kit has identified drugs in your car. We're going to take your car. Oh, no, here, just take the money out of my bank account instead. But there's clearly a problem here. And we need to deal with it as part of the rehabilitation of the image of the police. We're going to do a shout-out here to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network even now. We're talking about general stories. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, remember down in Flint, Michigan, all the problems with the water, and we're seeing more and more all across the country where there are issues where the local government will turn over publicly owned infrastructure for privatization. And it's always sold to the public as it's going to save money, it's going to improve service, and it never does. Costs go up, quality goes down. Over in Montana, in the city of Missoula, the citizens there filed a lawsuit under the state's eminent domain powers to return the water infrastructure from a private company to the city itself. And the Montana Supreme Court ruled 5-2 in favor of Missoula to kick out that private company and return control of Missoula's water to Missoula. And I think that's something that needs to start happening. Privatization is never done for the benefit of the people. It's done for the benefit of those private corporations. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call from George in Montana. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? You know, listen, I didn't even call in about the Missoula deal, but I happen to live in Missoula. And, yeah, this water company has been a big issue. Our rates are going up like crazy. And what they did is that in the middle of the process to try to take them over, they sold it off to somebody else to show that it was worth much more than what the city was going to pay for it. So now we're in the middle of that battle. But that's not why I called in. It was just a major coincidence. You brought that up while I was waiting on hold. I called in about the puppy side deal. Because before I moved to Missoula, Montana, I lived in the city of Los Angeles, where I was a meter reader for about 4.5 years for the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Mm-hmm. If I was reading a residential read book, I would have to go into up to 200, maybe 250 backyards every day. Now, there were over 300 of us reading meters in Los Angeles, and I never heard of anybody having to kill a dog. And we're in their backyards. Animal control officers in L.A. have guns in their truck. I never heard of any of them having to shoot dogs. What's up with these psychopath cops?
Well, it is an amazing problem out there. Now, I'm a dog lover. I've had a lot of dogs. I don't have one right now. It's not allowed under the Homeowners Association. But, you know, I'll go up to totally strange dogs, and I'll pet them, and I'll love them, and I'll rub their ears and everything. I've only ever been bitten once, and that was kind of unenthusiastic. Didn't even break the skin. It is very easy to make friends with a dog if you're not presenting a threat. But we're seeing all these horrible videos where there's a dog out there whose tail is wagging and they're happy and they're playing around and the cop just pulls out the gun and guns them down. And then they wonder why the American people have lost all respect for the police force.
Mike, you got to do a show with some experts on psychopathy because that's what's going on. These cops don't even apply for the job unless they're psychopaths. They can't survive in the department unless they're psychopaths. And people need to understand what a psychopath really is. You've got to forget the Hollywood definition.
Well, I need to interject here. I know there are some bad people in police forces. I had a half-brother that I was absolutely terrified was out there with a gun and a badge. But I know a lot of the local HPD officers, and yes, we're out here in Hawaii and Aloha and everything, and they're very, very nice people. We have one as a neighbor, and she has a 1-year-old boy and a puppy dog, and we just get along just great. But yes, a lot of people, not all of them, but some people who apply to be police officers do so because they want that uniform and the badge and to push people around. But it's exacerbated by police departments that protect the officers no matter what. In fact, I just got an email that apparently those police officers who shot Jack Yandis are not going to be charged. You have these Israeli companies that are treating the American police to treat the American citizen the way the IDF treats the Palestinians. And then you have the fact that a lot of police are heavy users of these prescription antidepressant drugs. And there was a story about 2 weeks ago in which this police officer just hauled off and shot an unarmed man, and the unarmed man said, "Why did you do it?" And the police officer said, "I don't know," which is a classic symptom of the failure of impulse control under these medications. So it's a complicated issue. But the net result is Americans see the police as a bigger threat than the criminals.
Yes. And Mike, I really do believe you might change your mind if you really study psychopaths, because I have a sister that's one, and I spent 20 years trying to understand it, and I finally do. There's a mechanism in the brain that comes in and intervenes and stops you from doing something that is just harmful to another human. Yes. Psychopaths don't have that. They don't have it.
Neither do sociopaths.
Well, they're really the same
well,
thing.
It's a question of degree, but you're absolutely right that ability to empathize with other people is just not there.
Yes. And by the way, I think it's Darwinism at work. It's not really a defect, because being a psychopath is good for the psychopath. There's survival value.
I'm afraid you're right. I mean, evolution always favors the most savage, and it reminds me of the movie Man of Steel, where Superman is battling this lady in the black Nomex whatever, the Kryptonian lady. And she's saying the fact that you have morality makes you inferior. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who don't have morality who actually think that's true, that the willingness to lie, cheat, and steal makes them superior human beings. I have a different opinion. They're not superior. They're simply humans who are willing to lie, cheat, and steal. Anyway, listen, George, I need to let you go. The phone lines are filling on up here, and I want to get on to some of these other calls. So we're going to switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha, Michael.
Aloha.
Just a quick thought for you out of humor when you're talking about the drug testing and so forth.
Yep.
You go if you happen to have a Dollar Tree there in Hawaii. I know they have them here in the States, depending on where you're at. Believe it or not, they actually have a drug testing kit for cannabis, or otherwise known as marijuana, here in the States.
Mm-hmm.
I was stunned. I was like, for one thing, you don't know what kind of quality it is to start off with, and two, I laughed my head off. I couldn't believe it.
Well, I remember back in the, I think it was 1980s, there was this thing where the U.S. government was spraying marijuana fields with paraquat, which, if you smoked that, could make you seriously ill. And the head shops back then were selling testing kits where you could test the marijuana you were buying to see if it had paraquat on it.
Well, that would make sense.
And, you know, it was as boneheaded as when the U.S. government during Prohibition actually put poison in industrial alcohol to discourage people from drinking it and wound up killing thousands and thousands of people.
Too bad they weren't sued over it.
Well, you can't sue the government. They're the government. You can go ahead and sue God, you know, but you can't sue the government.
Well, no, but the people are the government, not the federal officers that you send up there supposedly. So anyway, enough about that. Have a great one.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to switch over to Mike in Tennessee. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Greetings, Mike. You were talking about a fellow that was arrested and kept in jail, obviously found not guilty, but yet still stuck with court costs. What happens when people are arrested, right or wrong? If you go in there and you sign anything, you better know what you're signing, because these are virtual contracts, that agreements that force you into paying so much per day for room and board, and it adds up. And then you also agree that you're already guilty on the front end because of this contract. It's an administrative court. The government is a corporation posing as government, and when you walk into their courtrooms, you've already pled guilty by virtue of you being there, unless you assert that you're not that corporate fiction that they're coming after. That's the only way I was able to get out of a jail after 5.5 months and not have to pay thousands of dollars for room and board, is because I never signed anything.
Well, this guy with the soap, I don't think they charged him room and board because clearly they had made a mistake. He's dealing with $32,000 of court costs plus the loss of everything in his life. He lost his apartment because he couldn't pay the rent, and then the landlord came on in and threw all of his stuff in the trash, including all of his personal...
Mike, they're calling it court costs, but it's the jail fees, it's everything. Well, he was forced to plead guilty. In his case, the only reason
Hold it. You're jumping to conclusions. Okay, this guy never pled guilty. He was saying he was innocent all along. And the court costs had to...
There's no court cost if the charges are dropped.
He apparently had hired a lawyer, you know, to try and get this done, and and go through this whole. You know, we can get into the nitpicking all you want. The bottom line is the police screwed up. There's a problem with those portable field testing kits, and it needs to be addressed with. And incidents like this are not going to help rehabilitate the public image of the police. Okay, and that's basically where we're at with that. So, Mike, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Fritz Van Winkle, and aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Van Winkle, yeah, I was asleep for a long time.
Yeah, a lot of people were like that.
Hey, real quick, the test kits are most likely rigged, just like the FBI crime lab and all these other stories they're rigged because it's good for business.
Well, again, it certainly supports the civil forfeiture situation, what we need to do is get some people who've been victimized by these to just start suing for astronomical sums of money. And I know what happened. The sales representative from the company making these kits came on over to the police, talked to the upper level officers, gave them all kinds of inducements, said this thing is really great, and it'll test, it'll detect cocaine and marijuana and meth. What they won't say is the false positive problems. Apparently, things like sweet potato can false positive for opium, and it really.
Seeds.
Say again.
Poppy seeds.
Well, poppy seeds are opium. All poppies have a certain amount of opium in them.
Poppy seed bagels.
Yeah, poppy seed bagels, and it really is.
I called. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, I guess we're dealing with a time delay here because we're talking on top of each other. There is a problem here, and it has to be dealt with. Is really what it comes down to.
Yes, but I called about the cops that shoot first and ask questions later. And one thing that's always left out of the conversation, and I agree, they're probably psychopaths, and they're probably not too bright, and they're easy to they follow orders good because that's the traumatic training that they go through and so on and so forth. But what's missing, I think, in the conversation is that these guys are doing this because they've been trained to do this, and they've been given the green light to do this. This is the way they were trained. So it goes beyond, the psychopathy and And
it gets back to those Israeli security companies. And
do that. It's okay. It's part of the rules of engagement, just like in Iraq. They're trained to do this.
Well, just like that story we talked about earlier, where 2 IDF soldiers just grabbed a bicycle away from an 8-year-old Palestinian girl, smashed it up in front of her, and threw it in bushes. And then, that kind of an attitude infecting the American police departments is something we do not need.
We need to go to, the fish smells from the head, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is policy coming from on high because the police force is being turned into a tool of oppression against the American people. Fritz, I got to let you go. 3-minute break for commercials. Back with another phone call. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones. Chris in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Chris, are you there? You are.
This is Glenn, and so. But if you want to put me on hold and get Chris, that's fine, or I can continue.
Okay, who am I talking to right now?
This is Glenn in Philadelphia.
Okay, I wanted to talk to Chris in Las Vegas, but we'll talk to Glenn first, and then we'll get back to Chris in Las Vegas. My apologies, Chris. I'm going to ask you to wait here a minute. Okay, Glenn, what's on your mind?
A little bit of change of pace, philosophical curveball for you, Mike.
Okay.
You mentioned the swearing of oaths earlier, I believe, in the context of immigration and citizenship and stuff like that.
Yes.
And I would like to suggest that the swearing of oaths is a crock, and because an honest person doesn't need an oath, and a liar will swear an oath and break it. And that's why Jesus said, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no. All else comes of evil." And getting a Christian to swear on a Bible with a raised hand is a mockery of the instructions of the book upon which he is swearing.
Well, Glenn, I think Glenn, the purpose of that oath is to make sure that the incoming immigrant understands the ground rules. You will obey our laws. You will conform to our society's expectations. And apparently, a lot of these.
This is why. You don't need an oath to do that. You don't need a response. You simply charge them with a responsibility. That's like if I were called to be a witness in court, I would not swear. I couldn't be sworn in. I would, and accommodation is made for this in the courts. They're aware that people, of my stance exist, and they ask you to say, "Do you affirm?" They change the word "swear" to "affirm."
Yes.
And they say, "Well, you affirm that you will swear the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth." But I often maintain that even that is superfluous because, again, a liar will affirm and lie.
Well, we understand that. Okay, Glenn, let me get something in here. Okay, we're not taking this from the point of view that the incoming immigrants are either going to comply with the oath or not. It is simply making sure they understand that they are in a new country. The problem that we have with these illegal immigrants and refugees they're coming on in. They've been told that where they're going to is going to give them free stuff and allow them to rebuild their culture and their laws and everything exactly where they were at home in the new home, and that is simply not coming true. And that's where a lot of this violence is coming from.
Right, I agree, and I don't mean to I don't mean to focus strictly on the immigration thing. What's called for then is an explanation and a clarification. It doesn't require any affirmation to swearing.
Okay, well, you can do it. You can do it. Glenn, thank you for the phone call, Glenn. We're going to let you go here. You can do it with an educational program as well. The point is the illegal immigrants and the refugees are just coming across the border with unrealistic expectations, and nobody is telling them up front, you've got to adapt to us, not the other way around. Whether it's done with an oath or a classroom situation, doesn't really matter. It's simply not being done, and this is what's leading to some of these culture shock problems. All right, let's backtrack to Chris in Las Vegas. Chris, thank you for being so patient. What's on your mind?
Well, thank you, Michael, and I appreciate it. On your comments about the so-called false arrest regarding the donut icing being presumed to be methamphetamine or crack, this harkens back to the situation when the TSA was caught here in Las Vegas and other locations around America when they were supposedly doing their swab tests of passengers' baggage and coming up with positives for gunpowder or explosives.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't using a independent, not contaminated swab before each test. thereby they had a preloaded instrument, if you will, of painted swabs that would give a false positive, thereby giving them more activities, which would embellish their records of finding things, give them opportunities for advancement, give them esteem in the eyes of their peers, and make them more eligible for promotions. And they would do these secret, what they call SARs, selected for selective activity reports or special activity reports. Basically, they would classify somebody as a potential danger, and they wind up on the do not fly list through no fault of their own, when there might have been perfectly legitimate and explainable circumstances for the actions they were taking, such as flying to a funeral in the middle of the night on a one-way ticket when they knew they were going to be driving an automobile back. That would have been
it is a mess. It is a mess. There's no accountability. All right, Chris, got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm looking at the Intercept, and they've got yet another example of one of these FBI entrapment sting operations. This is out in Arizona, where an 18-year-old boy, Mahin Khan, was arrested 1st of July for plotting to support the Taliban as well as Islamic State and commit acts of terrorism in the local community. And how he got caught up is the Joint Terrorism Task Force apparently provided Khan with a prepaid cell phone so he could communicate with a government informant. The government informant came on out and said Khan was saying he was willing to kill hundreds of people and was going to attack the local DMV and a Jewish community center. There's only one problem. This kid is mentally impaired. He's operating on the level of a child. He's under serious psychiatric medication. He can't even get a driver's license because he's mentally incapable of passing the test. And this is the kid they set up and turned into this arrest. And the headlines trumpeted, "We've thwarted another homegrown terror attack." The FBI is really great at thwarting terror attacks they themselves are setting up. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Charles in St. Petersburg. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, just watching TV. It's just the so-called friends of Trump, like on Fox or Newsmax. And suddenly they're attacking with these so-called polls. He's down, and we don't know if these polls are that are coming out are even as phony as the what was the Reuters poll? They just
and they got caught changing the methodology to favor Hillary. I mean, especially with this nonsense about Trump dropping out, which is not being confirmed by the Trump camp. It looks to me like somebody somewhere made a decision saying we get rid of Donald Trump now. We don't dare go into November with him.
Well, you know about, of course, the Paul Ryan meeting with the Koch brothers and
yeah, he got a standing ovation.
Oh yeah, and then these people, I don't understand Trump having Pence as a vice president. The guy's another rhino sellout, just like Paul Ryan. These people are all around him. They're stabbing him in the back, and they wait their time on signal. It's just incredible. And so-called even Newsmax. Yesterday, Trump was wonderful. Now it's you can't. With few exceptions, he can't do anything right.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? Overnight, somebody somewhere with a huge amount of power sent out the word, get rid of Donald Trump now. We don't dare go into... And we understand that the Clinton campaign was actually looking at the election results, and they were very concerned about Pennsylvania, because if Trump could take Pennsylvania, Hillary is going to lose. That's going to be the battleground state. Pennsylvania is probably going to wind up being just like Florida back in 2000. But at this point, the real poll numbers have Trump overwhelmingly winning more than the vote riggers can overcome. And I think somebody somewhere said, okay, we have to get rid of Donald Trump now, or we're going to lose this little wonderful party we've had for the last 20 years.
I wonder if we're not going into another worse depression than we had in 2008 when the tech bubble
No question.
went under.
No question.
I mean, okay, Wall Street's not down, but all these main like Staples, these groups they're all closing.
That's exactly right here. The stock markets are being rigged. They've been rigged ever since Bill Clinton was president. The group is called the President's Advisory Committee on the Financial Markets, but it's known as the Plunge Protection Team. And they have been rigging the markets ever since to keep them in the green so that Washington, D.C. can use them as a political banner. See, the economy's fine. The stock market is up. You know, and if you're hungry and homeless and jobless, it has to be your own fault. We're doing a great job. Look at the stock market. That's their ban. But the stock market has become hopelessly disconnected from the real state of the economy. So, you know, forget what they're telling you on TV. Forget what they're telling you about the stock market. Walk down the streets of your own local town or city. Look at the retail vacancies. Look at the homelessness. Look at the decayed and rotting infrastructure and decide for yourself if this economy is working or not.
Right. What else can I say? You know, it's just... But all these rhino sellouts and these pundits, you know, that are really neocon pundits are
forget about neocon, forget about Republican, forget about Democrat. This is the narcocracy.
Right, there's no difference.
This is the narcocracy which is protecting itself. And it appears that they have decided they have to take Trump down this month or they're going to lose everything.
Right. I think you're right.
Well, I hope I'm wrong, but unfortunately that's what it looks like to me. Anyway, Charles, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to David in San Francisco. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hey, Michael. Hey, you know, my ears perked up when I heard you talking about the disabled guy, the mentally challenged guy, let's say, that was making this claim about Khan. Hey, are you familiar with the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993?
Oh, I'm very familiar with that one. And in that case, they had an informant inside who offered to replace the real explosive in the bomb with a fake substitute non-combustive material, and his FBI handler told him no. Let it go ahead. Right. That was even reported, believe it or not, in the New York Times.
Sure, absolutely. And have you ever interviewed Frederick Whitehurst?
No, I haven't been able to get him on the show, but, you know, he would certainly be an interesting person because Whitehurst was the guy who blew the whistle that the FBI crime labs routinely rig their test results to favor the prosecution. And he was immediately removed as head of the FBI lab, and they demoted him down to the paint chip department or something silly like that.
Right, yeah, and so he was also the one that testified on behalf of Rockman, the guy who was accused of doing the first World Trade Center bombing, the blind sheikh. I think that's who he is. And so the FBI found a guy who was so mentally disabled that that he was the truck driver, and they told him where to park the truck, and he parked it in the wrong spot.
Yes.
And when this bomb that the FBI gave them, the FBI not only had to trick them into agreeing to do this bombing, but they had to teach him how to deal with a bomb. They had to teach him how to drive virtually. They had to put the bomb inside the truck. And so the FBI planted that bomb there. Frederick Whitehurst basically, I think he was called in as an expert witness, and through the form of luck in the trial, the question came up about the real FBI activities in there, and Whitehurst's testimony disclosed that the FBI had provided the bomb and was offered the opportunity to create a dud and didn't.
Yes.
So it gets into, Whitehurst then goes into a little discussion. I heard him in an interview, and he thought that the real motivation was to loot the gold in the basement of the World Trade Center, and that the vault doors opened at, I think it was 8:45 in the morning, and that they would shut at 3:45. And so the bomb that went off in 1993 was delivered at like 3:60 32 or something like that, and went off shortly before the 45, but nobody was able to actually get the gold out. And then when you start looking at the 9/11 incident, both planes hit right after 8:45. So
well, let me cut in here. Let me cut in here because I think the 1993 bombing was supposed to bring down one of the towers to launch this program of war, but it was a fizzle. The tower remained standing, and so they had to wait a few years till 2001 to try it again. And this time they really went in there to make sure that this time that building will be coming down. And you're right. When they dug down to those vaults underneath the World Trade Towers, all the gold was missing after 9/11.
Well, it wasn't actually missing. They tried the truck that was to drive it out, or multiple trucks. One of them got wedged in there. The roof in the tunnel had caved in just enough to wedge the truck in there, so they weren't able to get out with their load. But it gets into. Have you heard of the thing called the Black Eagle Trust?
My association with Black Eagle, or actually Dark Eagle, was the cocaine running operation through Panama, part of that whole Iran-Contra thing.
This is different. It's a 9/11. I saw this video probably a year ago and lost track of it until just the other day. Black Eagle, the Nazi gold, they took all those teeth and whatnot, melted them down, put them into bars, and they then had a Black Eagle on them, and with the purity on it. And so the U.S. government seized all of that gold when they were able to find it. Mm-hmm. They were also able to find Marcos's gold. There were a number of different
and they got Gaddafi's gold. They got Gaddafi's gold.
Right, yeah, and so they got a whole bunch of different gold stashes after World War II, and the Black Eagle gold, or it's called the Black Eagle Trust, that basically, the story goes that in 1991, when the Soviet Union fell, the CIA created a fake bond issue. It was worth about $250 billion. I think it was like $448 billion. Mm-hmm. So they wrote themselves a blank check, virtually, $448 billion, and the purpose of it was to buy the Soviet Union. And so after, in the downfall of the Soviet Union, they go in there with endless amounts of cash, buying up dams, buying up factories, buying up apartment buildings, everything they could buy, they tried to buy. Well, the U.S. government was supposed to be the backer of this bond issue, and nobody knew about it. It was a top secret. So the bond issue was to be 10 years, and it was to run out on September 12th of 2001. So they had to drop these. Yeah, and so they had to drop the buildings, quick, and so they did it a day early. And then, of course, tried to blame it on bin Laden and all of these other diversions. Okay. But the real purpose of it was that who now owns the Soviet Union? Because in the long run, when you look at it, this bond issue gave somebody $250 billion, and this was when $250 billion was a lot of money. Okay.
David, let me get in here because we're running out of time and I'm going to have to let you go. But you keep saying the purpose. And one thing I've been telling my readers and listeners for a very long time is there's never just one purpose. There are always overlapping agendas. Israel, Project for the New American Century, endless war, grab the gold. We do know that somebody got into the computers of American Express and sucked out huge amounts of money just before the towers came down, destroying the computers and the record of where all that money had gone. And a little side note on that, they kept saying, we can't find where the money went, the computers are destroyed. And there was this company in Europe that said, actually, we can. We've invented a new process involving lasers. We can recover the data from those computer drives. And they started digging into where the money had gone, and all of a sudden, somebody comes and buys this European company. And the project gets put on the shelf, and that's the last that anybody heard of it.
Right. Well, check out this Black Eagle Trust online. There are a number of different, not only videos, but a lot written up on it, and it gives a whole different kind of explanation about 9/11. It kind of goes back to that, again, the Frederick Whitehurst and the 93 one, where, the International Monetary Fund was stashing their gold beneath the World Trade Center. And a robbery of the International Monetary Fund would have created, imagine the New World Order of that. Kind of a gold finger beyond belief for the International Monetary Fund.
They've done it anyway. I mean, we know that the New York Federal Reserve was taking gold on deposit from other countries and then leasing it out the back door. Now they can't get it back. There's just a huge amount of crookedness going on. Anyway, David, going to let you go. Got a bunch of stories I got to cover. Thank you very much. Have a good day. We're going to let you go now. And I got a couple more stories I want to finish before the end of the show today. Now, we've been talking about ransomware and how completely out of control it is. And I'm looking at this article out of Computer World, and the latest survey is showing 41% of U.S. businesses have encountered between 1 and 5 ransomware attacks in the last year. 6% of them saw 6 or more attacks. And this survey was of U.S., Canadian, and British and German companies. This is a huge, huge problem. And especially when they infect medical systems, it could actually kill people because doctors are not going to be able to pull up the charts of the patients before they decide what the next course of treatment is. Somebody might go into an adverse reaction. They don't know what drugs they've been given. Where's the NSA in all this? Silent. Where's the FBI? Silent. Where's the CIA in all this? 41% of businesses being hit by ransomware. That is a serious, clear and present danger to the economy of the United States of America, and the government isn't doing anything about it. They claim they can't find these people. Well, okay, then why should we take your word for it that you know for a fact that Russia hacked the Democratic National Committee emails? You cannot reconcile the two. And there is another very disturbing possibility. We know we live under a criminal government because the innocent people are being punished, persecuted, and the criminals are protected. James Comey proved that on national TV with Hillary Clinton. We know that civil forfeiture is out of control. The police are stealing more from the American people than the muggers, robbers, and burglars put together. What if all this ransomware is just another device to loot and plunder the wealth of the American people and businesses by a desperately broke and hopelessly in debt government? Because that would explain why they never seem even interested in trying to find these ransomware authors. Now, interestingly enough, there's a flaw in Microsoft Windows that allows malicious websites to obtain your username and password from your Microsoft account. And more about this when we come back from these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So we're talking about this flaw in Microsoft Windows that allows hackers to steal your username and password from your Microsoft account. And it is becoming a major issue because starting with Windows 8 and definitely under Windows 10, you sign in with your Microsoft account, which links your Xbox, Hotmail, Outlook, Office, Skype accounts, everything goes through that Microsoft account. And by the way, when I was giving Windows 10 that fair test on the laptop, which we have now thrown away, that's one of the things it did I did not like because I didn't have a Microsoft account. I had to sign up for one to use my computer. And apparently it is very easy for this hack to be able to get your username and password for your Microsoft account. Here's the kicker. This bug has been in Windows for 20 years. And Microsoft is not indicating any plans to change it soon, which suggests it may not be a flaw or a bug, but one of those many ubiquitous NSA backdoors. And is another reason why I am moving away from Microsoft product. Bitcoin had a major embarrassment. Their price plummeted when hackers succeeded in stealing $65 million from the digital currency exchange. This immediately prompted calls for a global Bitcoin registry of who's got Bitcoins and how much, which is probably why that initial hack was done to sell that agenda. People want Bitcoin because they want privacy in their financial matters, not another government looking over their shoulder at everything they do. Hillary PAC is spending $1 million to correct comments on Reddit and Facebook. They're basically admitting they're hiring trolls to go on out and harass people and support Hillary Clinton and bash Donald Trump and anybody who supports him. Now, over in India, breaking story. The Indian farmers are en masse starting to abandon GMO seeds, and they're returning to non-GMO indigenous seed. It's a major setback for Monsanto. Now, they're still going to have to deal with the problem of pollen contamination, but remember what India went through with that mandated BT cotton experiment, and all these Indian farmers lost their farms, and there was an epidemic of suicides because the BT cotton turned out to be less drought resistant than the natural varieties. And the Indian farmers are saying, no more, no more, no more, no more. Now, people are looking at this latest GMO labeling law that Obama just signed in and saying that its legal definition of what constitutes a genetically modified product requiring labeling is so narrow that virtually 90% of the GMO products will not have to have a label identifying them as such. It was a flim-flam. It was done there to halt Vermont and other states from requiring GMO labeling, say, we'll set the standard. And the standard is you got to be really out there before we make you label it. Down in Florida, oh, there's the music. I'll save this story. This is an important one. I'll come back to this tomorrow. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical. Go ahead. It's time to get angry. Share what you know with everybody that you know. Thanks to everyone who's donating to WhatReallyHappened.com. We really need it. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.